Hey everybody, welcome back. This is part 2 of the instructional lecture for COM 171. This week's topic, Chapter 7, and we're talking about small group dynamics and communication structures. So let's review really quick. Last video we kind of touched on the roles and the norms and the controls and the parameters of groups, and we learned that we have primary groups that are usually the families we were born into, or social groups, things like that. And we also have task-oriented groups that we often get assigned to or volunteer to join. And they all have different processes, these groups, of how they form, how they get together. Think about a family. It's kind of a loose, sort of culturally based structure in terms of how a family develops when two people get together to support each other through life, call themselves a family unit, and then maybe bring children into the picture. That is organically formed or naturally formed between people by choice. Well, at least in our country it's by choice. There are some countries where it's not by choice, but so different ways that families can come together. But in task-oriented groups, they're usually there's a more formal coming together of people for the most part. You have to try out to be on a sports team. You have to be elected to a zoning board, those sorts of things. So, hey Greyhound, hold on a second, I'll introduce you to Jim's guide dog, Greyhound. Greyhound, come here buddy. Greyhound, you were just up here being annoying. Come be annoying again. Come here. So this is Reggie's brother, Greyhound. Hey, hi Greyhound. He's sit. Sit. Hey, little wiry. He's my husband Jim's guide dog. My husband Jim also has a visual impairment and uses a guide, and this is his. A little more hyper and several years younger than Reggie, but Reggie's brother nonetheless. And they're all here and the cats are here. So, all right, getting back to this now, how groups form. So that's the part that we're at with the lecture. Talking about the different ways that formal task-oriented groups come together. So again, you're on the board of directors for something. Usually there's a voting process for that. You try out for a play, you have to audition for that, and so on. Even with like sororities and fraternities, there's a process for all of that, right? You've got rushes and pledging, acceptance within the Greek organization as to whether or not somebody's going to make a good brother or sister. So it's all those processes. People aren't just born into your sorority or fraternity. There's even if you're a Girl Scout, you have to take the pledge and sign a little card stating that you're going to try to live by the Girl Scout laws. And so all of those things, but there are stages. So there are stages for how groups get together and start to work on their tasks. These are specifically, like I said again, for task-oriented groups. So first they're forming. So what's the structure of the forming? Then they're storming, they're figuring out how things are going to go. Then they're norming, they're creating the rules of the road for the group. Then they're performing, they're actually carrying the task out. And then they're breaking apart, they're disbanding, they're adjourning, they're finishing whatever it is. And for some groups, some task-oriented groups, that in a sports team could come in the form of the end of a season, and the team isn't going to look the same next year because some people are being traded, some people are choosing to leave, some new players are coming on board. So think of it that way, like when you think about adjourning, it's the changing of the nature or some of the basic structures of the group. Or maybe the disbanding of the group all together. So, all right. let's talk about forming. So, the notes say, the group first meets or convenes, right? That makes sense. People have to get together first in order to make this happen. Seems obvious. Members engage in polite small talk. And then the first impression is formed, and roles and compatibility are negotiated. So that's what's happening in the forming part of the group, when the group is coming together, right? First, they're all convened in the same place together. And the members engage in that first layer of the onion that we talked about in interpersonal communication and relationship communication, where you have that first social level of polite small talk, the kind of small talk you have with people you don't know at a party that you meet for the first time, maybe. Maybe a little bit more formal than that. So you make polite small talk. And then you have first impressions of each other that are based on that very surface communication. Seeing how everybody gels and fits together is part of like the psychological, emotional processes of a task-oriented small group forming. So, and then the roles and compatibility are negotiated. Just want to make sure I see everything there. Yep. So, and so out of that comes, like, think about a learning group that you're in one of my classes. After all of this happens, where everybody's making polite small talk because maybe you all don't know each other very well, and well, yeah, we'll have to get in the same place, and whether that's our classroom or the library or something, you all have to get together, right? And then members engage in polite small talk with each other. You all do that. Then you get like kind of first impressions, or maybe even second or third impressions of each other. Like you don't know each other very well, but you've heard from this person and that person, the kind of how you are, or you've seen somebody from afar. You've done the observing part, remember, of that evaluation about whether or not you even want to engage in communication in an interpersonal way with somebody that we talked about in previous chapters. So that happens, and so you get your first impressions formed at that point, right? I like them, I don't like them. They're okay, they're a little quirky, but seem kind of fun. Wow, totally antisocial. So you're making up or really arrogant and full of themselves. So you're making these first impressions based on the small talk that you guys are making and the interactions that you're having at this first meeting. And through that, organically rises most times the leader of your group. And then there's the person who sort of naturally either volunteers or seems the best fit, is willing to collect things and write things, whatever, to be like the scribe of the group. And then the people who sort of assign themselves without even being told that they're the worker bees, right? So that can happen in a learning group. But now think about a project group in a company. A company brings together a bunch of people from maybe different departments to work on this one project. So the same sort of processes happen, but remember context and the different mission and all the kinds of things, that motivate and make some subtle changes in how these groups form. So of course they all have to come together. They meet in a conference room maybe. And then the members do chitty chat around some coffee and donuts or that kind of thing, and before they formally start the meeting, maybe they're waiting for one or two people to trickle in. And, based on who's the last person to come and who's the first person to come and who's offering the donuts and who's sort of like engaging other people in small talk, first impressions are formed during that project meeting that everybody's getting together to kind of like learn to work together, right? Like I said, they come from all different departments. They maybe see each other in the cafeteria, but they don't know each other. They've never really worked together before. So out of the first impressions that are formed, maybe roles and compatibility are already pre-decided by the organization. So those parameters may already be in place. The head of this project may be a woman named Mary, and Mary then is going to, in a strict organizational way, assign roles to different people in the group, maybe by talking to them about what their strengths and weaknesses, interests, and needs are. But in the end, that's how that process will work. But really, all groups, whether they are a project for a company like Google, or they are a classroom learning group like the ones that you engage in my classes, they all have to go through these specific project processes. And there's a lot of psychological research that's gone into the understanding of how these dynamics play out, because how they play out determines the success. And this is especially important in the global economy when it comes to project groups for corporations, for industry, for business, right? Getting these things accomplished. But they're equally important for committee work, for philanthropy and charity and social services and teaching and so many other things. So in order to make these things happen, researchers in the field of sociology and psychology examined, what are the different things that actually step by step take place within the coming together of a group. So that's why you're having to learn this step by step. That's why when you sit there and think, why do I have to know that we sit in a conference room? Why do I have to know that we all have to go to one? That's why, because I want you to understand the context that all this information comes from. The study of psychology and sociology and how groups form. It's very important for everything from a song to be written to a bridge to be built. A song to be maybe written, produced, and out in the ethers, out in the world for people to hear, or a bridge to be built. All these things matter in terms of the good functioning and the good foundation of a group, because if it doesn't have a good organic foundation, it's not going to sustain the project. It's not going to sustain its mission. They're not going to be able to perform, which is part of the steps for what the group's life cycle is, right? The life cycle of a group. So, like we said, that's the forming part of the life cycle. Now you've got the storming part. Members experience some conflict and differences of opinion emerge. So arguments and some miscommunication can occur, and there's often a deviation from the goal a little bit, and members may feel a loss of identity within the group. That can happen. So this is the next phase in a functioning group. First, you all come together, right, in that one place, wherever it is, and you politely small talk with each other, and you gain these first impressions of each other, and roles are starting to be assigned, and leaders are starting, and things seem to be kind of humming along, and you're exchanging, needs, wants, ideas, co-creative kinds of wonderful conversation, and then people start to get a little more comfortable with each other. And once that happens, all of these things start to kick in. Because once people start to get more comfortable with one another, they start to really have things that can sometimes come from ego, or from lack of self-confidence, or they have other agendas maybe that you're not aware of. And so again, understanding that this though is a natural part of the process. It's sort of like a working out the kinks part of the group coming together. So after everybody's like, well, lovey-dovey and figuring things out and what people should do what things, there could be some conflict. Well, how could that happen in one of your learning groups? I find that hard to believe. You mean somebody didn't answer a text? Or maybe they didn't send their slide to your Google OneDrive thing when they said they were going to, and when you saw them in the cafeteria, they just sort of acted like, I'll get to that, what's your problem? And you want to say to them, I want a good grade, and you don't because they're with their friends. So there's some conflict out of that situation, right? Differences of opinion emerge. Right there on the spot, you're thinking to yourself, well, grades are important to me. My grade point average is important. Getting a good grade on this project is important. and this other person is thinking, I have the ability to get to that and I will meet my deadline, and just because you haven't gotten it yet doesn't mean it's going to be late and you need to calm down because you're being really pushy. So now you have this, people are not aligned with each other here. The difference of opinions start to emerge about how something should be researched, or where, let's say you're putting a PowerPoint together, what particular order the slides should go in, and what sort of supporting materials should or shouldn't be in there, and do you have enough, right? So these are some of the differences of opinion that you'd encounter in that sort of a situation. Now, arguments and miscommunications happen. Well, anytime you have more than one person communicating, you have a miscommunication risk. Anytime that you even communicate something with your bestie, best, who you think gets you better than anybody in the whole world, there's a chance for miscommunication. There's a chance that you accidentally say something with body language, or you overstep boundaries, or something happens. And so, of course, that's going to erupt and emerge in this situation. Now, the group is going through a little bit of growing pains, or when a house starts to settle into its foundation. That's where you find out where some of the stress points are, and what needs to be worked on. So good things come out of this contrast that's going on here. There's a lot of contrast going on. But as I'm fond of hearing and saying quite often, out of contrast, you know what you don't want. That means you know what you do want. So if you realize that there's a problem happening within the group, whether it's a miscommunication, somebody is being an indirect communicator, or acting a little passive aggressive, or any of those things, there's an opportunity, because you know what you do want, to set things right, to get things back on track. So that's part of the process too. So the arguments and the miscommunications can occur. They don't always have to, and they're at different levels, right? You may have a group of people who all pretty much like see eye to eye and get along with each other. You got 3 or 4 people who all, take the work as seriously as one another, and are good students, and want to do a good job. So you have all of those foundations in place, and that's a good thing. But still, in all, you're going to have like disagreements and misunderstandings and miscommunications about how the project should be put together, how it should be presented, who should present what part of it, and the list goes on, right? So, and then there's also a deviation from the goal. Well, yeah, it sends you down some rabbit holes. You go places that you really didn't intend to go. Meeting time gets burned up by this emotional drama that's sort of playing out. Now, emotional things are important. People's feelings in the work that they're doing, or the interactions they're having with other people, that matters. It's not insignificant. It's the management of all of that matters, and that people feel respected, and that they feel listened to, and that they feel like they are not, this last thing, members may feel a loss of identity within the group. Like their part in all of this really doesn't matter. Like, hey, I thought I was the leader. Hey, I thought I was the person that was pulling the PowerPoint together. Who am I? What am I? Where did I come from? So these sorts of things happen during the storming period of the group forming. However, then we get to this really next norming phase, which is where things start to settle down and work out, right? So members are willing to work together toward a common goal. So at this point, most sane people in a group realize whatever your differences are, they can be overlooked, they can be worked out, people can compromise, they can come to a consensus, if not a full unanimous decision, at least most of the majority is heading in the right direction. So members of the group decide that they're not going to get up and walk out and quit school because this group is stinking. They just are going to stick with it, and they're going to do the best that they can. They're still willing to work within it. So members are still in the norming part of this process. Members are still willing to work toward the common goal. The goal is more important. The grade, the project that you're working on for a corporation is more important. Your paycheck is more important then your differences. Differences are resolved. Well, you know, in the face of needing differences to be resolved, it's amazing how many of them can be. You think that you have like these insurmountable misunderstandings or likes and dislikes with others, but when you have to figure out a way to get along with somebody so you could get something important accomplished, most sane people figure out how to do that. So this is the part of the process of norming, you know, that is included in that. Differences are resolved. Psychologists notice that in this phase, after they've come out of the drama, tempers have calmed down, people have relaxed, people are kind of more used to each other and what to expect from each other too. Because remember when we talked in an interpersonal section of this course in a few weeks ago, you know, we remembered that, now I lost my thought. Oh, okay, I'll get back to it. Well, you've been in my class long enough to know that that happens every once in a while. Anyway, so you have differences that are ending up being resolved. And then productivity usually accelerates at that point. Now everybody's back on board together. Everybody's, you know, they're all back on the task at hand. And so if the group is healthy and it's functioning, it goes through the phases of forming and then storming, where things sort of fall apart a little bit. Then the norming, where things sort of gel back together again. And members start to accelerate each other's contributions. So instead of saying, you didn't get that to me on time, they say, what can I do to help you get your project, your part of the project done? And, you know, maybe have opinions about it later, but for the sake of the task in the group, these are the kinds of psychological and behavioral things that are exhibited in the norming part of a group starting to get something done. All right, that's norming, and now performing. The group begins to reach and achieve its goals. That's very exciting. What if it's a fundraising group? The groups come together to raise money for a specific philanthropy. They're finally starting to reach their goal. Or it's your learning group again. And it's almost time for presentation and you guys are feeling like you're really pulling it all together. So this is the most satisfying part of the group process, where you could kind of feel like it's humming along. And all the wheels are on the ground, right? That's a good feeling to have when you're involved in a project with a group of people. And then the group is operating at its highest level of efficiency. That may not always be a perfect thing, but if it's the best that group can do under the circumstances, it's still a good thing. So that's another component to the performing part of groups functioning. And then meeting the objective of the uttermost priority. So what's the main objective? And finally meeting it. And then members evaluate and assess their performance. So where have you heard that before? Where members evaluate and assess their performance. Oh, Professor Watts, do you have us fill out those peer group evaluation forms for that? Oh, yes, I do. That's exactly why I do, because it's all part of learning to function and work in a group. Nearing the end, when you've completed your task, now's the time, that's the time when you can take a deep breath and sort of evaluate, look back over your performance in the group and other people's, like, would you ever want to work with them again? What did they bring to the table that was good, that would make you not hate working with them again? What did they bring to the table that was all kinds of fun, that made working with them a pleasure? And what made you feel like, oh man, we carried that one. They didn't contribute a whole lot and think I'll pass next time, right? So you have groups operating their highest efficiency, and then the members. So again, there you go. That's why I give out the peer group evaluation forms, so that you guys will have that sort of enforced opportunity, although it would happen naturally anyway. When you put it down on paper and reflect over it that way too, it seems to have a more formal period at the end of that project sentence. And again, it also helps to make things a little more equitable if there's somebody in the group that maybe wasn't performing as well as they could have and doesn't deserve the same grade as you. When a corporation has a group come together from those different departments to carry out a specific project, if everybody makes that project go forward and it makes the company money, chances are everybody in that group is getting a bonus. But if there's one person who's been specifically difficult and not carried their end of it, upper management will hear about it from the project manager. And the project manager will give that sort of feedback, and maybe they'll even give group evaluation feedback at the end of a corporate project. That happens. That's why we do it in our classes. So based on that, will you get the same bonus as everybody else if you're not contributing at the level that you should? Maybe not the exact same way everybody else does, but at your highest level of what the expectations are for your role in that group. So that's that part of it. And it makes total sense, doesn't it? I mean, it's just makes psychological sense that after you've gotten to this point and you're all amped up and you're ready to go and you pull the trigger on the project and or the presentation and you've been pretty successful with it, or you bombed, it just didn't work. There's got to be a time where you look back over it and evaluate what did and didn't work and what not to do again. So, now we are at the adjourning part of this, and I think I'm going to do this frame and then end this video because playing around with this YouTube stuff has caused my stepson John, who's behind the camera, and I to understand why it is that most videos on YouTube are 15 minutes long, because uploading like content that's more than a half an hour takes forever and takes up so much room. It's like the content that ate Chicago. So I'm going to try to break the rest of my lectures for the continuing classes, as long as we have to do this, down to 15-minute segments. And I know I've gone over that now. So just want to talk about adjourning really quick. Seems like it's so easy to say goodbye, right? So the group departs from the task, and as a result of the success or failure, so they're just done, whether they've done a good job or a bad job. Now the group is breaking up, and regardless of their success or failure in completing the task, members can reflect on the experience and apply that learned knowledge to subsequent group memberships. So now you know what works, now you know what doesn't work. It's, again, that's the reason for contrast, that's the reason for conflict. If there's ever a reason for it at all, it's because if you know what you don't want, you know what you do want. So, all right, ending this video right now. Come back for the third and final installment, and then that should be it for this unit, and we'll be moving on to chapter 8. So thanks for hanging in there, and stay healthy.